was August 12th, and I think that's a Wednesday, and they had the Urban League Young Professionals meeting, and I was leaving there because we were talking about what was happening on the streets, and I'd been out to like daytime marches and protests in the days following, but I had never yet been out in Ferguson at night. And I left that meeting, went to another meeting that was hosted by the NAACP at a church, and while we were at a church, a mother came into the congregation and was like, while we adults are in here talking, they are bringing out tanks on our kids. Like, we need to get into the streets and support them. And I was like, I don't have a kid, but she's right. And still dressed up in all my clothes from that work day, I went out. By this time, it was already starting to get dark, and I didn't have enough time to ask anyone to come with me. I just went. And so I was standing out there not really knowing what to do, but knew that by being out there, by being a witness, by being in solidarity, by chanting, by raising my voice, by making sure that the numbers were there, just showing up is half the work. I knew that that was the least that I could do on that night. We stayed out there, and in the midst of being out there was a journalist who had been arrested, as well as one of our local aldermen. And so the chants were like a mixture of us advocating for Mike Brown's life and making sure that there was justice for his murder and his death, but also we were out there saying free the people, free these folks who you've arrested. We stayed out there way past midnight, and I remember it was maybe 12:45 or so when this sea of armored trucks and officers walking beside them just started coming down West Florissant. And as they arrived between us, and we were standing across the street from the police department, the Ferguson Police Department, in the parking lot of the Andy Worm retail auto repair shop. And they stopped right in front of us. There were officers on the ground with their batons and their guns, and on top of the armored trucks there were some officers pointing these really bright lights at us, and they started these threats of get out of the streets, go home, we will make arrests. While that was happening, there's a Tough Poe, who's a local rapper. He started telling people to get down on our knees with our hands up, and he's like, if we're in kneeled position and they attack us, think about the optics. They're not going to do anything to us. While he was telling us that, there was a woman who came through, and she was speaking in tongues and praying out loud. And as we were kneeling to the ground, it creates that sense of surrender, but also that sense of prayer. And by this time my eyes were completely closed, and there were just people around me whose voices I heard praying. That night shook me, and when I left, I couldn't rest. I was up all night, and I kept going out night after night. But whenever I did close my eyes, that's when a sea of nightmares started. And that's what drove me to come back. I couldn't experience that
and walk away.
And just be like, I'm gonna go to work the next day,
right?
And
How do
be
people
chill? I started having the conversations at work, and started building, started communicating, started really seeing I'm not an organizer by the traditional means or the definition of the word, but I know some folks, and I know some folks who could create some stuff. And we went to town just creating as much as we could. But in the midst of us, forming the Artivist Collective and creating all of these direct actions, those nightmares kept haunting me. And that's when I reached back out to people saying, y'all, I'm really struggling. And you could see it in my demeanor, in my face, and just appeal to people to help me build this and do it.
it's one thing to get people to believe in your vision. It's another thing for y'all to build a mirrored casket.
Exactly.
Like, you know.
So like the artivist at large is just a conglomerate of tons of people who practice as artists, who are in other professions and they like to make things, and people who are like, I ain't no artist, but shit, put me to work, I can do something.
I know how to use a hammer.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
On this specific team, there were 7 of us. Myself, Damon Davis, he's everything. He's everything to me. He's everything to everybody. He's a filmmaker, a music artist, a record label owner, a visual artist, an installation artist. He's great. And we had a bond, and so I had to have him on my team. Marcus Curtis, the only white person, no, one of 2 white people on our team. He's a carpenter, and so he led a lot of the building process. Sophie Littman, who's like more administrative, like I knew that we wanted her skills for project management. Mallory Nizam, who's now at Harvard studying urban planning, and she was organizing like these street theater protests, and we brought her on because we knew that there was a performative element that we wanted to have with this casket. And she partnered with Derek Laney, who was a local organizer for one of our grassroots organizations, and we all had a jam session at a coffee shop. I came with some really rough sketches. Marcus took my sketches and said, well, what about this? And that following Saturday, Sophie and I went out. At the time I was working for a museum, and I had an art bus. Like I had this whole vehicle to myself.
The stars were aligned.
We went collecting wood, mirrors. We went to this, local, just like junkyard, and found these staircase rails, and the staircase rails became the handles on the side of the casket, and it was scrappy, but we were able to get
it was like y'all, scrappy like y'all.
Exactly. We were able to get people to help us fund it. It was really great. And that collaboration sealed a lot of unity for us, so that when we were working on our own individual stuff, because all of us were, we kept coming together, we kept supporting in that sense of validation and unity.
To bring ideas together, like an incubator, like you can bring all your ideas there and get feedback from a think tank.
Right, exactly. So that was part of the origin story, but the beautiful thing about it is that all of us were a part of this training institute in St. Louis called the Community Arts Training Institute, or the CAT program. And we were in it at different times. At the time, we didn't realize that all of us had gone through it, but we had. And we were like, we know how to do this work.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What does a casket teach us about society?
I think it's a matter of like empathy and responsibility and accountability, that we all know that death is a definite. Like everyone will perish at some point. But if we can't live in dignity, we at least deserve the right to die in dignity. And what happened to Mike Brown, the way that his body was murdered, but also the way that his body was treated after death. 4.5 hours before his body was even covered. The public saw it. Residents saw it. People had, like, his body was out there so long that people were able to come from other parts of the city and come out there. And that sense of dignity that came with that casket in particular, this is a vessel that becomes the home of the dead once they're buried. And the fact that we place mirrors all over it indicates that, one, we could see ourselves in it, and we want you to be able to see yourself into this, so that we can decrease the amount of people, black people especially, black boys especially, who are dying in this undignified and very inhumane way, murdered by the state. And at the same time, the sense of having the mirror, of like, look into the mirror, like, we are responsible for this. And so that double meaning of this casket in particular and how it relates to the casket of Emmett Till, which is inside of this museum.
Right inside.
I cried so much because the indecency of hateful people branding themselves as supreme and killing the most innocent, killing children.
The most vulnerable.
The most vulnerable.
Right. And he can't defend himself. Can't defend himself.
Exactly. And so we knew that connection. Like we had seen those images. But when it came alive and the people took over, community members took over this thing.
Because it took 6 of them to carry it, right? Like, yeah, right, you know.
I think that's when it really became even more powerful. And Damon and Marcus and Derek, they, you know, as men on our team, they really stepped up with it. Derek carried that casket for a few days in the back of his minivan that he had at the time. And I remember it was after they had infiltrated our police headquarters with it that he came up to me, because I had been in a hospital throughout part of this time, and I came out there because the police headquarters were 2 blocks south of where I live downtown in St. Louis. I came out there with my hospital wristband still on. He had the casket with some other black men in the city, and you know, after lecturing me, he was like, I don't know if I can keep carrying this, because when it sits in my car, I feel the weight of it. I feel that heaviness.
Energy, yeah.
And so, because of proximity, it stayed in my apartment for months. And that heaviness, like, that's, I mean,
What did that do to the nightmares? Did that impact?
It impacted me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily with more of the same nightmares, more so that was the constant reminder that I gotta go out and stand up. I gotta be out here too. And I wasn't a frontline person. Like, my demeanor is not one that is for the megaphone to be like corralling people and shouting at. I'm not that. I know my lane. But if you give me a microphone, I can minister a word to you. And if you give me art supplies, I can make something magic happen. And I knew what my role was, and so I kept organizing artists. I kept, you know, meeting up and showing up for the art bills and making sure that we were contributing to the visual language of protest. That when all of those media people were coming in for the sensationalism, we had visual markers of what we meant, so that you can't misinterpret this. And that, like, that sense of clarity, that sense of visualizing the narrative was something that struck me then and continues to be like my wave into the sustainability of this movement, of how can I contribute strategically to how we organize, and how can we think, you know, with a designer's mind about the innovation, the creativity of how we resist, and what else can we do, you know? Because Jason Stockley, another officer in St. Louis City, killed a young person in 2011, and even though he was indicted, he was not convicted, and we're still awaiting the local leaders to say whether or not they're going to convict this person of murder. And already demonstrations and direct actions have started to happen, like preempting. But what you see that is very troubling is that the governor has stepped in to already start teasing a state of emergency and violence against people if they should protest. And that has placed us at this point of deep concern, because now we live in this, you know, this society where there's an administration that is calling for, we have a president who's calling for police officers to harm us even more. Right. And as black folks, it's like, when did y'all ever stop? You know, like, you know, when can we at least
Yeah.
get the dignity of not having someone in leadership escalate the problems that are already plaguing us, you know? And so it's kind of tense. We don't know when this verdict is gonna come, and we all know that for us, we don't have a choice but to resist. If it's if they do choose to convict him, I think that would be very great. But with the history of our state and of our city, it's very unlikely. And so we've been strategizing. We've been meeting up already. I was just on the phone while I was in this building, while I was in this museum with Elizabeth Vega, who was also in a mirror casket team. And she runs this art house. And we've already been having those meetings about, okay, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna disrupt? How are we gonna visualize and let people know, like, how are we gonna sound the alarm about all of these issues? It's, standing up, rising up is in our bones. It's in our psyche. It's in our blood.
It's in this building.
It's in this building.
Right? It's in this building. Yeah.
So we will do what we have to do. But at the center of it, for me, it's like everything has to be rooted in love.
Yeah.
That if we can't love each other while we're marching together, if I can't trust that you have my back, like I have your back, then we're not gonna make it far. And so we're very intentional about creating space and creating moments where that type of energy can be exchanged, so that we can sustain ourselves in this movement. Because there's been so much infighting and so much tension. And putting on my social worker hat, I very much care about the core well-being of the people I'm with. And so we were on the phone talking about that.
Yes.
Like, how do we integrate moments of healing and moments of recalibration in the midst of all of this?